Chapter 10. The Arrow of Ahriman. Chedi Daan was not yet accustomed to the noise of the Tormancean capital. Unexpected sounds were heard in her tiny room on the 4th floor of a house in the lower part of the city of Center of Wisdom. Constructed of cheap sound-conducting materials, the walls and ceilings buzzed with the stomping of the people living above. Harsh, inharmonious music could be heard. Chedi tried to determine where this discordant noise was coming from, in order to understand for what reason people made such a noise, realizing that with the poor arrangement of houses, they disturbed their neighbors. The whole house would resonate, knocking, creaking, whistling, the vibration of water pipes in the thin walls constantly cutting the ears. Chedi realized that the houses were built in a slipshod manner and were not designed for such an incredible number of residents. And the street was planned without taking into account resonance and had become a noise amplifier. All attempts to relax and switch to inner contemplation failed. No sooner would Chedi disconnect herself from the discordant chorus of sounds, when suddenly booming and sharp blows would become audible. It turned out that doors were slamming in houses or carriages. For socially not upbrought Tormancians, it was even considered chic to slam doors harder. What struck Chedi's eye, first of all, was that the Tormancians were completely unable to adapt to the conditions of their close life and continued to behave as if they had yesterday left the vast steppes. Chedi went to the window overlooking the street. Thin, uneven glass distorted the contours of the opposite house, which covered the sky in a grim mass. Chedi's keen eyes could observe the smoke of carbon monoxide and lead gases rising from underground tunnels designed for heavy city traffic. For the first time, not with her imagination, as in history lessons, but with her whole body, Chedi felt the crampedness, stuffiness, and inconvenience of a city built only in order to more cheaply feed and provide for an unnamed mass of people, an abstract number of food and water consumers. There was no point in even thinking about concentration and rest until he learned to disconnect from the incessant cacophony. To the clothes, it was also necessary to grow accustomed. Chedi made every muscle in her body tremble, massaging the itchy skin beneath her clothes. The outer garment could not be complained about. The steel-colored blouse with a high collar, tied with a soft black belt, and wide trousers of the same material were liked by Chedi. But she was forced to put on underwear as well, a bra and a rigid skirt, completely unfamiliar to a woman of Earth. New friends assured Chedi that appearing on the street without these strange devices could lead to a scandal. Chedi obeyed and sat half-naked while the hostess and her sister fussed over the fitting of clothes. Chedi's ash hair, back in the gardens of Zoam, had been transformed into a stiff pitch-black mane, which the girls of the planet Yanyak liked to wear either randomly disheveled or braided into two tight short plaits. Contact lenses had changed her eye color. Now, when Chedi approached the mirror, a strange and somewhat unpleasant face looked back at her. Her two mistresses, however, did not tire of admiring her, promising numerous victories over men. This is precisely what Chedi sought least of all. The quick completion of the mission depended on her complete freedom as an observer. Friends of Tale spent the nights here with Chedi. Hagoi Street, that is, Flowers of Happiness, was inhabited by Sholi. She was received by a couple of young Tormancians and the hostess's sister, who lived here temporarily. The three-syllable name of this young woman was abbreviated as Zasor. She had undertaken to be a companion to Chedi in the city of the Center of Wisdom. For young, and especially beautiful girls, walks around the capital of Yanyak in the evening hours were dangerous, not to mention the night when strong men did not appear on the street unless absolutely necessary. The women were abused or attacked mainly by youths obsessed with sexual psychosis. Beauty, instead of being a protection, only attracted young bandits more, as predators are attracted by the smell of blood. A faithful blue SDP with bent legs lay under the bed. Here they slept on high beds of iron or plastic and was covered with a blanket that was lowered to the floor. A precaution, as explained by Chedi, taken so that the owners would not be suspected of housing an Earth dweller. Officially, Chedi was listed as a guest of the family of an engineer at a huge plant, and the contact of the star pilot with the dark, unenlightened Sholi was considered impermissible. The owners could pay for this by exile from the capital. This was a serious threat. It was more difficult to live in other parts of the planet. There, people received less for their labor and therefore had less money for food, for the purchase of things and entertainment. The inhabitants of the city of the Center of Wisdom, and even the 2 or 3 huge cities on the coast of the Equatorial Sea, were the envy of other, less happy inhabitants of Yanyak. The essence of this happiness remained incomprehensible to Chedi until she realized that wealth and poverty on the planet Yanyak were measured by the sum of trifles that were in the personal possession of each. On a planetary scale, in economic reports, in reports of successes, only things appeared and spiritual values were completely excluded. Chedi later became convinced that self-improvement was not a task of the humanity of Yanyak. And at the same time, the owners surprised Chedi with their cheerful artlessness and love for the modest decorations of their cramped home. 2 or 3 flowers in a plain glass vase was enough to delight them. If they managed to get some cheap figurine or a cup, then the pleasure stretched out for many days. Each dwelling had a video device screen with a powerful sound transmitter. And in the evenings, when family people, that is, those who lived in pairs and with children up to the age corresponding to the beginning of the first cycle of the Earth, sat in their homes, contemplating dim little flat screens, the rumble of the soundtrack would shake the walls, ceilings, and floors of flimsy houses. But their inhabitants treated this with surprising indifference. The young sleep was sound. They did not feel any need for reading, reflection, or even more so, meditation. Much free time was spent on idle talk, chit-chat, and newsmongering. On Flowers of Happiness Street, there was a school, a somber red brick building in the middle of a stunted, trampled garden. Classes at school ran from morning to evening. From time to time, the school garden and the adjoining part of the street were filled with roars, wild whistles, and shrill laughter as boys and girls frolicked in between lessons. An even louder noise arose in the evening hours, screams, stomping, abuse, and fights, like a nightmarish dream about people turned into monkeys by an evil wizard. The pupils lived in a long building behind the school for the entire period during which they, already taken from their parents, were prepared for distribution to vocational schools and division into lowly and sholi. The monstrous bad manners of the children did not bother anyone. Even among adults, it was considered almost a shame to help a sick or elderly person, to show respect for old age, to yield in something to another person. Chedi did not immediately understand that it was not the special depravity of the Tormancians, but the widespread psychological complexes of humiliation and inferiority that were to blame. The growth of these complexes in the world of absolute power went in 2 directions at once, capturing an increasing number of people and ever more strongly taking possession of each separately. The strange society of the planet Yanyak, it seemed, did not think at all about how to make life easier for every person, to make him calmer, kinder, happier. All the best minds were directed only at reducing the cost of production, at multiplying things. People were forced to chase after things and die of spiritual hunger even earlier than physical death. As a result, there were many inconveniences stemming both from ill-considered construction and from careless technology and unskilled work. Young Sholi received only primitive craft skills. No one possessed true mastery. The inconveniences of life caused millions of unnecessary clashes between people, where everyone in his own way was right, and the social structure of the planet was to blame, forcing people to wallow in everyday troubles towards the elimination of which no one strived. The Tormancians were not guided by morality or religious rules, let alone a higher consciousness. There was an absolute absence of a permanent, strict, and in all aspects developed system of upbringing of people as members of society. Nothing held back the spontaneous desire to act in spite towards others, to take out humiliation on a neighbor. Idiotic criticisms, vilifications, defamation of people in production or in the spheres of art and science permeated the entire life of the planet, constricting it with the poisonous belt of inferno. Obviously, in the future, with the same system of governance, there would be less and less benevolence and patience, more and more anger, ridicule, and mockery, more characteristic of a herd of baboons than a technically developed human society. More than 2,000 years ago, some nations on Earth believed that political programs, being applied in the economy by totalitarian power, could change the course of history without preliminary preparation of human psychology. Not knowing how to improve the destiny of peoples, dogmatists greatly influenced the destiny of individual persons. The Arrow of Ahriman struck without a miss, because unfounded changes had disturbed the stability of society achieved from time immemorial and at a high price. The necessary averaging of social phenomena did not work out. On the contrary, the rush from one extreme to another intensified, without scientific analysis and registration of the happiness and well-being of people. This constituted the main calamity of the oligarchic regimes and was very clearly expressed in Tormance. The flaws in the social structure of Tormance, previously known to Chedi Daan, placed her in the position of a detached, albeit supportive, observer. Direct contact with defects began from the first days of life on the street of Flowers of Happiness, and here the feelings of Chedi became completely different. Surprises came on her very first walk with Zasor. The Tormancians walked along the street at random, not sticking to a certain side. Those who were stronger deliberately strove ahead, pushing aside the oncoming, forcing them to jump aside, roughly snapping at the reproaches. Wherever the aisles hindered the crowd, at the gates of parks, the doors of amusement palaces, shops, in Tormance as elsewhere, where there was inequality of distribution, the monetary system of remuneration for the two lower classes of society was preserved. Canteens and in transport. Strong men and women pushed weaker fellow citizens, trying to get through first. All this was already known to Chedi, and, despite a trained will, she often caught herself barely managing to restrain attacks of indignation. The obligatory desire to bypass, to outstrip, even for a minute, other people, might appear as morbid idiocy to a person unfamiliar with infernal psychology. One day Zasor, pale and frightened, told Chedi that she had been summoned to the local assembly house for a meeting with the serpent. Such meetings took place in every district of the city 2 or 3 times a year. No matter how Zasor tried to explain the meaning and purpose of these meetings, the essence of the matter remained incomprehensible to Chedi. In the end, Chedi decided that this was an ancient cult rite that had become a custom among non-religious people of modern Yan-Yak. The horror that was inspired in Zasor by this invitation, or more precisely, this summons, made Chedi suspect that something was not right and insist on a joint visit to the serpent. The large, poorly ventilated hall was quickly filled with people. Nobody paid attention to Zasor and Chedi, who were sitting in the middle row. The audience sat in nervous anticipation. On the swarthy cheeks of some there was a flush of excitement, while others, on the contrary, stood out with the yellow pallor of their faces. Some in excitement walked along the wide aisles between the rows, their heads bowed and muttering to themselves, but not poetry, as Chedi had first thought. Tormanzians in general very rarely spoke poetry aloud, embarrassed by the feelings expressed in poetry. Most likely, they were muttering some learned formulas or rules. The hall accommodated about 1,000 sholi, that is, people not older than 25 years, according to the local age count. 4 strokes of a large gong filled the hall with the vibrating rumble of copper. The audience froze in tense postures, straightening their backs and fixing their gaze on the platform of a small stage, to which the lines of the walls, ceiling, and floor converged, narrowing. From the darkness of the corridor that stretched beyond the illuminated stage, a cubic dais rolled out, painted with intertwining black and yellow stripes. On it stood a serpent bearer in long black clothes, holding a small phonotransmitter in his hand. The day of the meeting has come. He yelled to the whole room, and Chedi noticed how Zasor's fingers began to tremble. She took the cold hands of the girl into her own, calm and warm, squeezed them, instilling peace of mind into the Tormancian. Zasor stopped trembling, and with her eyes thanked Chedi. Today, the lords of the great and glorious people of Yan-Yak, the serpent-bearer bowed, test ye through the insurmountable knowledge of the serpent. Those who hide, lowering their eyes, are the secret enemies of the planet. Those who cannot repeat the hymn of devotion and obedience are the clear enemies of the planet. Those who dare to oppose their will to the will of the serpent are subject to rigorous interrogation by the assistance of Yang Gao Yuar. Zasor shuddered and, barely audibly, asked Chedi to hold her hand as the worst was about to begin. Yielding to a sudden intuition, Chedi plunged Zasor into a cataleptic state. And at the right time! On the dais, in the place of the disappeared serpent-bearer, appeared a translucent globe. It gleamed with a pattern of sinuous lines that sparkled as the globe rotated. Corresponding to the running of multicolored waves, a powerful sound vibrated, rising in tonality. The globe rotated a vertical column of rainbow light and acted hypnotically on the audience. Chedi had to exert all her will to remain an impartial observer. The sound cut off, the ball disappeared. On the dais, with calculated slowness, there rose, elaborating enormous rings, a giant red metallic snake. In its open mouth flickered a crimson fire, and in the flanking protrusions of its flat head, purple eyes glowed viciously. The lamps went out in the hall. The snake, turning its head in all directions, ran the rays of eyes along the rows of seated Tormancians. Chedi met the gaze of the metal reptile and felt a blow. Her mind, for a moment, was clouded. Weakness slithered upward, from the legs to the heart. Only a strong nervous system, hardened by special training, helped the star pilot to defend her psychic independence. The snake bent lower and swayed, almost touching the heads of those in the front row. In time with it, all those who were sitting in the hall swayed from side to side, except for the numbed Zasor and the unconquered Chedi. Noticing that the serpent bearer was standing at the corner of the stage, vigilantly watching the audience, Chedi, hugging her closer, began to rock her companion along with her. The snake let out a prolonged cry, and it was immediately picked up by all 1,000 Tormancians. They began to sing a solemn and mournful hymn, praising the lords of the planet and the happiness of their life, freed from the threat of hunger. Looking at the thoughtless faces and gaping mouths, Chedi was struck by the immense stupidity of what was happening. On reflection, she realized that the people in a hypnotic trance, against their will, were firmly anchoring in their subconscious the meaning of the song, which will enter into battle with all nonconformity, both internal and introduced from outside by other people or through books. But the terrible metallic snake was just a machine. The true rulers of the destinies of the Sholi were located in the background. Lost in thought, Chedi forgot about the need to open her mouth along with everyone and pretend to be singing. The finger of the serpent bearer pointed to her. From behind approached the stocky figure of a lilac guard, whose exceptional stupidity could not be penetrated even by the hypnosis of the red snake. He put his hand on her shoulder, but Chedi pulled out a pass card. The lilac recoiled with a low bow and trotted towards the serpent bearer. They exchanged phrases, inaudible in the roar of the crowd. The dignitary threw up his hands, eloquently expressing his annoyance. Chedi was not required to play the part any longer. She sat motionless, looking around. The excitement of the Tormanicans grew. Several men ran into the aisle between the front row of chairs and the stage. There they fell to their knees, shouting something incomprehensible. Instantly, 4 lilacs led them to the left, through a door hidden behind draperies. 2 women crawled on their knees, followed by several men. The serpent bearer led the lilac like a skilled conductor. At his subtle gesture, the guards dragged 2 men and a woman out of their chairs. The seized one sat fast, turned around, said something inaudible in the general noise. The guards rudely, unceremoniously dragged the people into the dark corridor behind the stage. The sweep of the body of the snake was shortened, the movement slowed down, and finally the snake froze, extinguished its eyes, directed its triangular head upward. The people fell silent and, as if waking up, looked around in bewilderment. They have no memory of what happened, guessed Chedi. They had learned to hide their feelings in the general meetings that were constantly held in their places of work. There, as Chedi had been told, the Sholi were demanded to publicly approve and praise the wisdom of the oligarchy. Centuries of practice had taught people not to attach any importance to these requirements, displaying external submission. Then the oligarchs had found other methods to invade the psyche and reveal secret thoughts. Chedi quietly awakened Zasor. "Do not talk to me and do not approach me," whispered the star pilot. "They know who I am. Go home, I'll get there myself." Zasor, still stunned, winked in understanding. Chedi slowly rose and left, taking in the cool air with pleasure after the stuffiness. She paused at a thin, square-cut column of cheap artificial stone, still contemplating the scene of total repentance under hypnosis. Suddenly, she felt on herself a persistent gaze, turned around and found herself face to face with an athletically built Sholi in green clothing with a clenched fist sewn on the sleeve. A small group of people from among the Sholi reached the age of 30 Earth years. These were the so-called sport paragons, professional players and wrestlers, not occupied with anything besides training of muscle, the entertainment of huge crowds in stadiums with spectacles that looked more like mass fights. The athletic paragon looked at her persistently and obtrusively, like many other men met here by Chedi. Even in the gardens of Zoam, she had grown accustomed to the manner of the inhabitants of Yanyak to undress with a glance. On Earth, no one found anything special, exciting, let alone shameful in any case of nakedness in the natural form of a person. Of course, everyone should be clean and not take unaesthetic postures, which was taught from the first year of life. For an inhabitant of the earth, the views of the men of Yan-Yak could cause only an unpleasant feeling, like the views of madmen. The paragon asked, "Came from far away, recently here, probably from the tail hemisphere? How did ye? Chedi caught herself, you guess?" The Tormancian chuckled contentedly. "There, they say, there are beautiful girls. And you," he snapped his fingers, "you walk alone, although you are the most beautiful of all." The stranger nodded towards those descending the stairs. "My name is Shotshek, short for Shot Kashek." "Mine is Chi Dizem, or Chasam," Chedi answered him in tone. "Strange name. However, you are there, in the tail, somehow different." "Have you been there?" "No," the Tormanzian admitted to Chedi's relief. "Are you somebody's? I don't understand." "Well, do you belong to a man or not?" Seeing the bewilderment of Chedi, Shotshek laughed. "Does anyone take you?" "No, nobody," realized Chedi, mentally berating herself for stupidity. "Come with me to the window of life." This is what the Tormancians called the large rooms for watching films and performing arts. "Well, let's go," answered Chedi. "And if I had a man, I would call him aside and we would talk." Shotshek shrugged his shoulders dismissively. It became clear that for him such negotiations always ended successfully. Shotshek took possession of Chedi's hand. They headed for the gray box at the nearest window of life. The stuffiness here was like the assembly house. The seats were even more cramped. In the hot room shone a huge, sparkling screen. The Yan-Yak technique made it possible to create believable illusions that captivated the audience with colorful lies. Chedi had seen many films from the starship, and this one was not much different from them. Although it was a long time ago that the planet Yan-Yak had turned into a single state, the action took place in one of the past wars. The heroes acted with all the cunning and cruelty of ancient times. Murders and deceptions were continuous. Beautiful women rewarded the heroes in their beds or subjected them to unparalleled humiliation. One of the main characters was a woman. She killed and tortured people along the course. Crazy racing of horses, races on rattling machinery, captivity, and flight again. The action unfolded on a tested psychological canvas. When the heroine was in bed, slightly covered with a blanket, Tormanzian band on certain parts of the body, with the naked but shot from the back hero, Chedi felt the hot and wet hands of Shotshek grab at her chest and knee. Regretting that she did not possess the temper and psychic strength of Phi-Rotis, Chedi made an attempt to distance herself. The Tormanzian held on tightly. Not wanting to respond with violence, Chedi sharply drove her elbow into a wedge, freed herself, got up and walked towards the exit, to the irritated cries of those whose view of the show she was blocking. Shotshek caught up with her on the path leading to the big street. "Why did you offend me? What have I done wrong?" Chedi looked calmly, even sadly, figuring out how to get out of this situation without revealing her incognito. "Where I am from, we don't behave that way," she said quietly. "If you hug like that in the first hour of acquaintance, what to do in the second?" Shotshek laughed unkindly. "Can it be that you don't know? How old are you?" 80. Chedi lied, having translated 20 Earth years into Tormanzian. "Even more so," I thought. 65. "Let's go." "Where to?" "To mine. I have a room with a window looking out over the canal. I'll buy some wine and dinat, and we'll be fine." And Shotshek again hugged Chedi tightly. She silently broke free and hurried out of the alley into the street. Passers-by were not taken aback by the pursuer. He caught up with Chedi, and jerking her by the hand, forced her to turn and face him. "Why did you come with me?" he asked angrily. "I didn't think it would turn out this way. Sorry." "What does sorry have to do with it? Come on, it will be fine." "Or didn't you like me?" "Come on, you won't regret it." Chedi stepped aside, and then Shotshek hit her in the face with his palm. The blow was not particularly painful or stunning. Chedi had become much stronger in training. But for the first time, the earthly girl of the EMH had been hit with the specific intention of humiliating and insulting. More surprised than outraged, Chedi looked back at the many people hurrying past. They watched with indifference or apprehension as the strong man beat the girl. No one intervened, even when Chedi was hit harder. "Enough," decided the star pilot and disappeared. The psychological game of disappearance was known to every child of the Earth, and consisted in the ability to distract the attention of the opponent, focus it on something extraneous, silently go behind him and not leave the sector of invisibility. This could be done only in an open place, anticipating all the turns of the enemy. Shachek looked around wildly and bewilderedly until Chedi appeared in his field of vision. "Caught you! You will not get away!" shouted the Tormanzian, raising his fist. Chedi ducked down at lightning speed and inflicted paralyzing blows into 2 nerve nodes. Shachek collapsed at her feet. He squirmed, struggling to get up on unruly legs, and looked at Chedi with immeasurable surprise. She pulled him up against the wall so that he could lean his back against it until the numbness passed. A company of boys and girls stopped near them. Unceremoniously pointing fingers at the defeated Shachek, they chuckled and made unflattering remarks. For the first time, Chedi encountered the custom of the people of Yanyak to rudely ridicule everything incomprehensible, scoffing at the misfortune of their own fellow citizens. Chedi became ashamed. She walked quickly down the street. The insolent laughter continued to sound in her ears, and the eyes of Shachek were still full of amazement. A strange, new feeling took possession of her. Similar to sadness, it cramped her heart. But sadness brought with it a sense of detachment, and now Chedi seemed to be entangled in a net of indeterminable guilt. She did not yet understand that what had come to her was pity, an ancient feeling now so hardly known to people on Earth. Compassion, sympathy, a desire to help possess the human of the era of Mehans. But the pity that was born of the powerlessness to ward off trouble was new to Chedi Dan, and made her anxiously comprehend her behavior. Dissatisfied with herself, she tried to find the mistake, not suspecting that both her comrades, Eviza and Vir, were stumbling just as painfully in the first steps of life in the capital. Chedi hurried home in order that, in the absence of Sasor, she would not commit any more foolishness. Meeting the astonished looks of passers-by, she did not suspect how much she differed from the inhabitants of Yanyak in her posture, her head held high and her chest protruding proudly. The men whistled deafeningly after her, expressing their admiration. The women turned with indignation and called her a shameless woman. Chedi had no idea that this was just an attempt to rise, discrediting a beautiful competitor. The usual of Tormance hostility from everyone towards everyone felt to Chedi physically burdensome. She sighed with relief when she found herself outside the threshold of the tiny apartment. She had become close to the feelings of people of antiquity, hiding in their dwelling from external life. Now she liked the initially surprising to her chaos in the apartment, the Tormanzians' manner of throwing their things, creating chaos from clothes. Crumpled brochures, they read printed publications here, food wrappers, and cosmetic accessories. Sasor was delighted with the return of her guest, suddenly remembering that she had left her without money. Immediately, she made Chedi take a few worn plastic squares with hieroglyphs and code marks. Again, Chedi was surprised at the negligent generosity of the Sholi, who did not protect either their own or other people's property at all. They did not try to save money, as was the custom in ancient times on Earth. Only later did Chedi realize that in the short life of the Shuli, completely dependent on the arbitrariness of the rulers who could at any moment deprive them of everything, up to and including life, there was no future. It made no sense to save money, take care of things. Even children did not please people without a future. All the time there was a dull struggle between women who did not want to give birth and the state, which prohibited contraception and abortion. In order to raise the declining birth rate, the sovereigns had recently honored mothers with certain privileges. The fact was that the threat of a decrease in the number of people was so tangible that the rulers had become uneasy, obedient crowds or the support of the oligarchy. Obediently accepting the money, Chedi told Sasor about her adventures. The Tormanzian woman got very frightened. "This is dangerous, to insult a man. You do not yet know how vengeful they are. I know he will be jealous. Men are very envious. And so are women," Sasor added after thinking. Chedi did not immediately understand what Shachek should be jealous of, and only a long time later realized that the same envy of wealth, this time not material, but spiritual, aroused this hatred, especially since this kind of wealth was completely unattainable for people like Shachek. "But he was the one who insulted me," she objected to Sasor. "That has no significance. To men it is unimportant what we women feel, only that their pride be satisfied. And we're always to blame. I wonder how is it on Earth?" Chedi began to talk about the true equality of women and men in the communist society of the Earth. About love, separated and independent from all other matters, about motherhood, full of pride and happiness, when each mother gives birth to a child not for herself and not as an inevitable retribution for minutes of passion, but puts him or her in the outstretched hands of the whole society as a precious gift. A long time ago in the EDW, at the inception of the communist society, the supporters of capitalism mocked the ethics of freedom of marriage and the communality of upbringing children, not suspecting how important it was for the future, and not understanding at what high level such issues should be resolved. Sasor listened as if spellbound, and Chedi admired her. The Tormanzian in casual clothes looked like a boy. A wide belt that supported trousers of coarse fabric lay obliquely on narrow hips, and under it was tucked into a blue shirt with a deep open collar and rolled up sleeves. Coarse, shoulder-length hair was parted in a careless path, falling over anxious, anguished eyebrows. The open lips of a large mouth spoke of utmost attention. Sasor leaned against the lintel of the door, curving a slender figure and crossing her arms. Surrendering to a sudden feeling, she did not fight it or try to understand it. Chedi hugged Sasor, motherly gently stroking her hair and cheeks. The Tormanzian shuddered, pressing herself against Chedi, and she spoke to her a few gentle words in the earthly language. The girl buried her hot forehead in the breast of Chedi, as with a mother, although the difference in their age was not at all big. They stood embracing until the volatile twilight of the planet Yanyak came to an end. In the room, darkness immediately set in. The street lighting was too meager. Sasor backed away from Chedi, switched on the light, and became shy. Hiding her embarrassment, Sasor began to hum, and Chedi was amazed at the musical transparency and sadness of her songs, not at all similar to those she had heard on the streets or in the places of entertainment, with their rough rhythms, harsh dissonances, and loud manner of performance. Sasor explained that dignitaries condemned the melancholic songs of young people, unreasonably believing that they reduced the already low tone of life. And the old tunes, beloved by the older generation of Loli, contained unnecessary memories of the past and also caused grief. Therefore, only cheerful, praising, and, of course, mediocre songs received the approval of the authorities in all planetary programs. Now it became clear to Chedi why the Tormancians sang so little. She herself wanted to sing all the time, but on the street she was afraid to attract the attention of the crowd, and at home, of the neighbors. Chedi remembered how the people of Yanyak were embarrassed by manifestations of tenderness, love, and respect, at the same time giving full vent to abuse, ridicule, and even fights. She decided that Sasor needed to see other Earthlings. That evening, Chedi was expecting a meeting with Rodis by SDP. They made their way into Chedi's room without turning on the light, thoroughly draped the window, and only then rolled the silver-blue SDP out from under the bed. From the turn of the disc on the bracelet, the nonaped lit a signal and, humming, rose on its limbs. It slightly frightened Sasor, who took it for a living creature. When the carrier beam was directed to the known coordinates, Phi Rodis was not there. Flustered, Chedi did not immediately mark the silent signals running down the wall on which the SDP was focused. Finally, she noticed the circles that followed the chain and realized that Rodis had left the Zone Gardens, leaving there a tiny indicator that was activated by the beam of the SDP. Alarmed, she tried to summon Eviza or Vir Noreen. An hour passed before Eviza finally appeared on the screen, dressed for evening in a very open, tight dress. Amethyst-colored fabric set off her topaz, wide-set eyes and crimson lips. Eviza Tanet reassured Chedi Phi Rodis had left the gardens of Zoam and was now residing in the old Temple of Time, located in an elevated part of the city and turned into a repository of ancient books. Eviza was staying at the Central Hospital and was free to connect with Rodis. Chedi arranged to meet with Eviza 4 days after the inner-city medical conference Eviza was to attend. "Come in the morning, Chedi," Eviza said. "We'll have lunch in the hospital canteen. By the way, where do you eat?" "Where time will find itself in my wanderings around the city, in the first dining room I come across." "Ye need to choose a permanent canteen, one where the food is better. Everywhere is equally bad. The Sholi do not like their work in the canteen. Sasor says that they, how is it, steal, take the best for themselves." "What for?" "To eat it themselves, take it to the family, exchange it for squares. Money. That is why food is not tasty." I have the thought that your friend is wrong. Here in Tormance, people are so terrified of the age of hunger that they try to make as much food as possible from each product, adding inedible substances to it. They spoil natural milk, butter, bread, and even water in this way. Naturally, such food cannot be tasty, and often it is simply harmful. Hence the enormous number of liver and intestinal diseases. And that's why the water here is so bad. And they pour it out to no avail. Surely it is better to use it sparingly, but make it tastier, said Chedi. Here at every step one meets with things that contradict common sense. In the evening they turn on TV screens with might and main. The music rumbles. Straining, they say some special praises. They show films, chronicles of events, murderous sports performances. And people go about their business, talk about something completely different, trying to shout down the transmitters. Eviza looked inquiringly at Chedi, but she could not find an explanation. Was it possible to understand the actions occurring as a result of monstrous egoism, rudeness in communication, negligence in work and speech, the desire to poison the already bitter life of a neighbor? Drivers of clumsy transport vehicles, for example, considered it a virtue to rush through the streets at night with noise and crashes. And then the principle of inhuman cheapening turned these machines into stinking monsters, spewing out smoky poison and tormenting the ear. Even simple tools for working on Tormance were made inhumanly, without any concern for the nerves of the worker and the hundreds of people around him. Chedi was unable to describe all the abomination of the screeching of power saws, drills, the murderous rumble of hammers, and the grinding of shovels. She'd had to make a special recording of these sounds, in complete bewilderment at how the Tormanzians did not go deaf and did not fall into an insane frenzy. The destructive structure of their machines, inexplicable for Earthlings, was understandable to the Tormanzians, and, even worse, seemed natural to them. As in the EDW, the highest jewel of society, the person himself, his health, psychic completeness, and peace, was sacrificed for gewgaws. Often such techniques became directly life-threatening. Thousands of weaves of electric wires, stripped for cheapness, Tormanzians did not know the dense packing of energy in ball batteries, threatened the unwary with death. Dangerous chemicals, generously and carelessly, scattered everywhere, entered production processes, mercilessly poisoning people. Fortunately, the shortage of fossil fuels had stopped further pollution of the air. "Do not sadden, Chedi," said Eviza from the screen of the SDP. "We pay not too much, speaking in the words of the Tormanzian, to see with our own eyes such an incredible society." Rhoda says that this is exactly how she imagined the EDW on Earth. Then what is so incredible? It's only sad if one thinks about the vain trials and sacrifices of our common ancestors who have already gone through all this. Be strong, Chedi. We still have many tests ahead. Every day something unpleasant happens here, and I would not want to live long on Tormance, Eviza admitted. Chedi heard the voices of the returning owners behind the wall and said goodbye to Eviza. The SDP crawled under the bed on its own. Dropping the covers down, Chedi met the gaze of Zasor. The Tormanzian woman stood with her arms folded, her cheeks flushed, and her eyes filled with tears. "Mighty snake, how beautiful Eviza is," she said. "Even my heart stops, like a little one when listening to a fairy tale." "And what in her is so special?" smiled Chedi. "Everything. You are also good, but she... Only, why is she so tough? Why is there little in her of love and compassion?" "Zasor, how could you find so many vices in Eviza? There are no such people on Earth." "Really, no, although," the girl pondered, "at first you seemed to me the same. Maybe she's different, but beautiful to the point of impossibility." And Zasor, brushing away uninvited tears, slipped out of the room. Chedi remained deep in thought, recalling the touching defenselessness of children and women of Tormance. An agitated 2-year-old baby, wringing her little hands in embarrassment and expectation, a girl, all in trembles from the first rudeness in her love, a woman rushing about to please an unkind lover. Everywhere there were tears, awe, fear, and again tears. This was the lot of the woman of Tormance, a meek and patient toiler who struggled in domestic life with a complex of humiliation. The man was lord and tyrant. A sharp pity hurt Chedi, but dialectical thinking reminded her that meekness and patience cultivate rudeness and ignorance. In primitive societies and in the dark ages of the earth, men feared women with advanced intellect, their ability to use the weapons of their gender. Primal fear forced men to invent special restrictions for them. To protect her from witchly properties, The woman was kept at a low level of mental development, exhausted by hard work. In addition, all Tormanzians had a common fear inherent in people of an urbanistic society, the fear of being left without work, that is, without food, water, and shelter, because people did not know how to obtain all of this otherwise, if not from the hands of the state. The cruelty of state oligarchic capitalism inevitably makes the feelings of people, their sense of the world, petty, superficial, and transient. The ground is being created for directed evil, the Arrow of Ahriman, as a process inherent in this very structure of society, where people who have said to themselves, "Nothing can be done," know that the arrow will strike all the best in their lives. For the first time, Chedi chided herself for the self-assuredness with which she undertook to study the sociology of such a planet. She lacked the unshakable confidence of Eviza and the depth of Phirotis. And Eviza Tanet at that moment was pondering over her speech at the conference. Would it not be a shame, causing a feeling of humiliation, to tell the doctors of Tormance about the gigantic power of earthly medicine next to the amazing poverty of their science? She had already seen doctors, ascetics and heroes, who worked sparing no effort day and night, struggling with the poverty of hospitals, with the ignorance and crassness of the lower staff, who hated and cursed their work, poorly paid, dirty, and dishonorable. The overwhelming majority of the sick were lali, and the lower staff were sholi. These different class groups treated each other with hatred, and the situation of the sick became tragic. Usually, loved ones did their best to help the sick to overcome illness at home. With surgery, this was impossible. The suffocating, overcrowded wards of postoperative patients with their specific odor was dreamed of by Eviza for a long time, interrupting her dreams and memories of Earth. Eviza was sheltered by engineers from the loli class, people who stood higher on the hierarchical ladder. Therefore, her room and bed were a little more spacious and comfortable than Chedi's. Each step in the Tormance hierarchy was expressed in some minor advantage, in the size of the apartment, in the best nutrition. Eviza watched in amazement at how ferociously people fought for these paltry privileges. They especially tried to break through to the upper layer of dignitaries, to become serpent bearers, where privileges increased to the maximum. Deception, slander, and denunciations were also used. Bribery, slavish zeal, and bestial hatred of competitors. The Arrow of Ahriman was on a rampage, tossing aside decent and honest people, multiplying the villains among the serpent bearers. On the day of the conference, Eviza, vigorous and blossoming, entered the office of the central hospital. She walked through the irradiation chamber and disinfection corridor into a small hallway and stopped there to look at herself in the mirror. From the adjacent smoking room, loud voices could be heard through the open door. The speakers were not shy. Eviza realized that the conversation was about her. Young doctors, gathered for the smoking ritual, vied with each other to express their admiration for the guest in such a way that Eviza did not know whether to laugh or be indignant. "It makes me shiver when she passes," came a high tenor, yellow eyes shining, breasts tearing at the dress, legs, oh what legs. Eviza suddenly entered the smoking room. 3 young doctors smoking pipes greeted her. Eviza looked them over with laughing eyes, and they realized that she had heard, if not all, then a lot. They embarrassedly reached out after Eviza, hastily extinguishing their pipes, and she gave her gait the character of an erotic dance in order to punish the youth for the rough erotics of conversation. The agitated breath behind her testified to the success of her mischief. The regal chief doctor of the hospital, in the usual clothes of doctors of Yanyak, a bright yellow dressing gown with a black belt and a yellow soft cap, in glasses, on seeing Eviza, stretched in a smile the thin and unpleasant lips of the sly and grumbling. Sharp, narrowed eyes quickly ran around her outfit, which seemed bright because of its full compliance with the figure, mood, and proud face of the hostess. "Let's go to my car," and, without waiting for consent, the head physician dragged the guest to a side exit where a long and narrow transport mechanism was waiting for him. The conference was supposed to take place in a country palace. The car got there along a steep road, overtaking many pedestrians. In one place, Eviza noticed an old lolly with a heavy box on her shoulders and involuntarily made a gesture to stop the car. But the driver did not even slow down. At the surprised look of Eviza, the chief doctor only frowned. They drove up to a building with dilapidated architectural decorations of huge stone flowers. The high wall had here and there caved in, and the 3-tiered gate tower had been dismantled. but the garden that surrounded the building seemed thick and fresh, without the stamp of wilt that lay on the withered parks and gardens within the city. "Ye are surprised," I noticed, "that we did not give the old woman a ride?" Looking sideways at Eviza walking next to him, the chief doctor began. "Ye are discerning. One cannot be excessively kind here," said the Tormancian, as if justifying himself. "Firstly, one could get an infection. Secondly, it's necessary to take care of the car. And thirdly," Eviza stopped him with a gesture. "There is no need to explain. You think first of all about yourself, to care for your car, this primitive product made of iron and plastic, more than a person. All this is natural for a society in which the life of a minority rests on the death of the majority. Only, for what did ye devote yourself to medicine? Does it make sense to treat people with easy death and rapid turnover of generations? Ye are mistaken. The lowly is the most valuable part of the population. It is our duty to heal them in every way, to fight back against death. The ideal, of course, would be if we were able to save the brain alone, separating it from the dilapidated body. Our ancestors were mistaken in the same way, considering the brain and psyche to be something separate from the body, supposedly not connected with all of nature as a whole. There were people who argued that the whole world is nothing more than a derivative of human ideas about it. This is the root of many biological errors. The brain and psyche are not created by themselves. Their structure and work are derivatives of society, time, the sum of knowledge during the formation of the individual. Only through the continuous absorption of new impressions, knowledge, sensations, does the brain of emotional and memorable people overcome natural conservatism, and even then only to known limits. The great scientist, 30 years after the peak of his activity, will become a conservative, hopelessly behind the times. And he himself will not understand this, because his brain is tuned in consonance with the world left behind, elapsed into the past. But one can model new conditions, accumulate them. While ye are modeling, the condition of the brain and conditions of the environment will diverge even wider. The noosphere, that is, the psychic environment of man, changes incomparably faster than biological transformation. We did not theorize, but fought with death on experience comprehending new possibilities of extending life. And added to the colossal list of crimes of nature, in man millions more martyrs. Moreover, many discoveries have brought people more harm than good, having taught political bandits, fascists, to break a person psychically, to turn him into an obedient beast. If one counted all the animals tortured in experiments, tortured by your operations, patients, then one would have to severely condemn your empiricism. In the history of our medicine and biology, there have also been shameful periods of neglect of life. Each student could dissect a live frog, and a semi-literate student, a dog or a cat. Here, measure is very important. If he crosses the line, the doctor becomes a butcher or poisoner, the scientist, a murderer. If he does not reach the required edge, then the doctor becomes a projector or an illiterate bureaucrat. But fanatics who are ready to dissect a person, to say nothing of animals, in order to carry out some unprecedented operation, to replace something irreplaceable, are more dangerous than everyone else, not understanding that a person is not a mechanism assembled from standard spare parts, that the heart is not only a pump, and that the brain is not the whole person. This approach did a lot of harm with us in its time, and I see it flourishing on your planet. Ye experiment on animals at random, forgetting that only the most extreme necessity can somehow justify the torture of higher forms of animals, endowed with suffering to no less a degree than man. Just as defenseless are your healed in hospitals. I saw the research laboratories of 3 metropolitan institutes. The amount of suffering contained in them cannot justify insignificant achievements. The chief doctor pulled Eviza by the arm, pushing her off the path. They found themselves behind an overgrown bush. "Duck down, quickly," whispered the Tormanzian so demandingly that Eviza obeyed. Several people were running from the gate, chasing in front of them a corpulent man with a gray face and bulging eyes. Strength abandoned the runner. He stopped, staggering. One of the pursuers kneed him in the face, bending the fat man in half. The second knocked the victim down. The pursuers began to trample the defeated one with their feet. Eviza broke free of the hands of the chief doctor and ran to the place of massacre, shouting, "Stop! Stop!" Immense surprise overran the brutal faces. Fists unclenched, smiles flickering across twisted lips. In the ensuing silence, only the sobbing of the victim could be heard. How can ye, 6 young people, beat one fat and old? Or do you not understand the disgrace, the shame of such a thing? A stout man in a blue shirt leaned forward and jabbed a finger at Eviza. Great snake, how did I not realize? You're from Earth. Yes, answered Eviza, kneeling down to examine the wounded man. Leave this carrion. Trash is durable. We only taught him a little lesson. For what? For being a scribbler. These damned lackey writers invent fables about our life, misinterpret history, proving the greatness and wisdom of those who allow them to live longer and pay well. For one phrase in their scribblings liked by the rulers, we all have to pay. It is not enough to beat such people, they must be killed. Wait, Eviza exclaimed. Maybe he isn't so guilty. Here you don't care about the accuracy of what is said or written. Writers also do not think about the consequences of some biting, spectacular phrase. Scientists about the darkness that will entail their discovery. They are in a hurry to quickly notify the world, resembling roosters crowing at one another. The leader broke into a smile, open and handsome. But you are clever, earthly one, only not correct. These ones know that they are lying. They are worse than the girls who are hired in the gardens for money. Those sell only themselves, but these, all of us, I hate them. He kicked his victim who was crawling away on all fours. Stop, unhappy people, Eviza blocked the writer with herself. Snake lightning. You grasp nothing. The leader narrowed his eyes. They are the ones who are unhappy, not us. We leave life full of strength, not knowing disease, not knowing fear, not caring about anything. What can frighten us if death is close at hand? And the lolly are forever trembling, afraid of death and a long life with inevitable diseases. They are afraid to displease the serpent bearers. They are careful not to utter a word against the powers so that they are not transferred to Chedi and sent to the temple of gentle death. They are afraid of losing their measly advantages in food, housing, clothing. So one has to pity them. Nothing of the sort. Do you know how the right to long life is earned? They concoct ways to make people obey. How to make food out of all sorts of rubbish. How to get women to give birth to more children for the poor. They look for laws to justify the lawlessness of the serpent bearers, praise, lie, seeking promotion. So they want more difficult work? N.O. The higher a person stands with us, the less he works. So they climb to reach the rank of serpent bearer, and for this they are ready to betray the whole world. And ye do not betray, even in the meetings with the serpent? Ye don't fear Yungar? The ringleader of the group of Chedi shuddered and looked around. You know more than I thought. Well, farewell, earthly one. We will not see each other again. May I ask ye to do something important? Precisely ye. Eviza looked at the leader. He flushed like a boy. It depends. Go to the old temple of time, where the monument is. Seek out our mistress there. Her name is Phyrodis. Talk to her as directly and intelligently as ye did to me. Just find Engineer Tail first. Yes, he is a lolly, but there are not many people like him on your planet. Fine. The leader held out his hand. And say that ye were sent by Eviza Tanet. Eviza Tanet, what a name! The 6 disappeared into the garden. Towards Eviza from the gate came a noisy group of doctors from the central hospital, headed towards the large public car. The chief doctor came out from behind the bushes, called assistants, and they silently dragged the victim to the car. Who is he? Eviza asked one of her hospital colleagues. A famous writer. How they beat him. The speaker blossomed with a satisfied smile, as if he was completely on the side of Chedi. Perplexed, Eviza walked with the doctors to the narrow entrance portal. Inside, the building echoed the usual style of Tormance. Heavy doors led into a spacious lobby. A wide staircase ascended into a hall framed by a 2-row colonnade. The lobby was crowded with people. Their gaze instantly turned to Eviza. The guest was taken upstairs and seated in the side gallery on a shabby sofa. All those who arrived continued to stay below, lined up in a lively corridor. Are they expecting someone? Eviza asked a passing elderly man in a yellow medical coat. Of course, he answered sternly. Representatives of the Supreme Assembly are due to arrive. Why arrive and not just come? The interlocutor frightenedly looked at Eviza, glanced back and disappeared between the columns. The wait lasted more than half an hour until it became clear that the dignitaries would not be coming. The crowd below seemed to burst. With laughter and loud talk, characteristic of the Tormancians, everyone rushed up the stairs to the hall. The chief physician found Eviza and took her to the dais, where the most famous doctors of the capital and guests of honor from other parts of the planet had settled. Eviza refused, assuring that she did not deserve such a high place, and for her, an ordinary and young doctor of the Starfleet, this was improper. She sat down at the column at the edge of the hall, feeling the attention of the entire audience and concerned about the upcoming speech. Orators slowly replaced each other. They spoke for a long time, about things more than obvious, in advance conditioning the direction of the embarked-on reports. For some reason, the Tormancians called such a performance a short introductory speech. All over it was felt that these streams of platitudes did not interest anyone. Eviza could read this from the bored faces, from the noise in the hall, which was barely covered by the rumble of the sound amplifiers transmitting the speech of the orators. Finally, the host of the meeting announced the desire of the doctor from Earth to speak to the doctors of Tormance. Eviza walked across the hall to the podium, greeted by shouts, slapping on the arms of chairs and whistles of delighted youth. As wild as such a roar and noise seemed to her, it expressed good-natured feelings. Bowing down, Eviza thanked the Tormancians. When she spoke with an indescribably soft, earthy accent, which the amplifiers could not coarsen, there was an unprecedented silence in the hall. The Tormancians did not take their eyes off Eviza, examining her from the intent and cheerful topaz eyes to the strong legs and strange blue shoes sparkling with lights. They tried to understand why this woman was so similar and at the same time so different to the women of Yanyak. Your elders wanted me, having become acquainted with the medicine of Yanyak, to analyze the errors of doctors and relate the achievements of Earth. But my knowledge of the science of Yanyak is insignificant, and most importantly, I do not have the basic criterion necessary to judge any science. I have no idea about its share in the creation of human happiness. Therefore, it would be immodest and disrespectful on my part to act as an advisor and critic. All I can do is to tell ye about the obstacles overcome on Earth. The teaching of any subject, especially large sections of science, with us begins with a review of historical development and all the mistakes made along the way. Thus, humanity, struggling with the tendency inherent in people to forget the unpleasant, protects itself from untrue roads and the repetition of past failures, which, in pre-communist history, were many. Already in the EDW, a huge difference was defined between the forces and the material resources that humanity spent on medicine and on science of military and technical significance. The best minds were employed in physics, chemistry, mathematics. Step by step, biology and medicine diverged from the physical and mathematical sciences into their own understanding of the world, although outwardly they widely used their methods and research apparatus. As a result, the nature surrounding man and he himself as a part of her appeared before humanity as something hostile, which should be subordinate to the temporary objectives of society. Scientists forgot that the great balance of nature and the structure of the organism is the result of a historical path of unimaginable duration and complexity in the co-subordination and interconnection of integral parts. The study of this complexity, at least in general terms, required centuries of work, and earthly humanity began to imprudently and hastily adapt nature to passing utilitarian goals, with no care for the biological conditions of life necessary for people. And man, the heir of the painful billion-year path traversed by the planet, like an ungrateful and unreasoning sun, began to waste, converting to entropy the fundamental capital that he inherited, the energy accumulated in the biosphere, which, like an already cocked spring, served for the technical leap of mankind. Eviza stopped, and at once the audience thundered with the banging of palms on wood. The theme touched upon was close to the planet Yanyak, which had been devastated by the folly of its ancestors. Eviza, unaccustomed to such a reaction in a meeting, stood helplessly looking around the noisy audience until the chairman calmed the enthusiastic listeners. Eviza was not at all intending to inflame the passions of an unrestrained audience, which led to the loss of reasonable and critical perception. She decided to be more careful. She recounted how short-sightedly mistaken were those who triumphed, conquering individual manifestations of diseases with the help of chemistry, which annually created thousands of new, essentially deceptive drugs. Fighting off small forays of nature, scientists overlooked massive consequences. Suppressing diseases, but not healing the sick, they gave rise to a monstrous amount of allergies and spread the worst kind of them, cancer. Allergies also arose due to so-called immune overtension, to which people were exposed in cramped homes, schools, shops, and shows, as well as due to the constant transfer of new strains of microbes and viruses from one end of the planet to another by fast air transport. Under these conditions, the bacterial filters produced by the organism in biological evolution, the likes of the tonsils of the throat, sinuses of the face, or lymph nodes, became their opposite, gateways to infection. The loss of measure in the use of medication and surgery damaged the protective devices of the organism, just as the measureless use of power crushed the protective devices of society, law, and morality. The essence of healing, based on old ideas, lagged behind life. When in the process of the development of society, religion, belief in the afterlife, in the power of prayer, and in miracles perished, the world outlook of the backward capitalist system entered a hopeless dead end of disbelief, emptiness, and purposelessness of existence. This gave rise to pandemic neuroses in the elderly generation. The escalation of the threat of total war as a method of political agitation, the constant reminder of this in newspapers, radio, television, contributed to the psychoses of the young part of the population. Contradictory aspirations to gobble up all the joys of life and to escape from her reality. The saturation of entertainment, the intensity of artificial experiences, created a kind of overheating of the psyche. People increasingly dreamed of leaving for another life, to the simple joys of being of their ancestors, to their naive faith in rituals and mysteries. And the doctors tried to heal, according to the old canons of the previous pace, a different tension of being. Cars, home improvement, household appliances significantly changed the normal physical activity of people. Medicine continued to benefit from the experience gained in completely different living conditions. The general weakening of the body, muscular, ligamentous, and skeletal systems, despite the absence of hard work, led to the massive development of hernias, flat feet, myopia, increased fractures, varicose veins, hemorrhoids, proliferation of polyps, and weakness of the sphincters, with impaired digestion and frequent appendicitis. Many skin defects were a consequence of poor metabolism. The doctors, bewildered by the influx of diseases, operated endlessly, cursing the boring routine of simple cases, unaware that they were facing the first wave of disaster. And when, following the general weakening of people, diseases of tainted heredity began to occur more and more often, only a few progressive minds were able to recognize this as the Arrow of Ahriman. The greatest benefit, the elimination of child mortality, turned into a disaster, the reward of which was many mentally disabled, complete cretins, or physically handicapped from birth. An alarming surprise was the increased frequency of births, of twins, triplets, in general reducing the level of health and psyche. The fight against the new disaster proved to be exceptionally difficult. It could be overcome only with the highest moral responsibility of all people, and the penetration of science into the very depths of molecular genetic apparatus. Eviza listed several more insidious traps, exposed by nature on the progressive path of humanity. This path was to return to original health, but without the former dependence on ruthless nature. The essence of the matter was concluded in the necessity to egress from her hecatomb, through which she carried out the improvement and perfection of animal species, mercilessly avenging clumsy human attempts to break free of her power. "And we succeeded," Eviza exclaimed. "We are all healthy, strong, resilient from birth. But we realize that our wonderful human body deserves better than sitting in chairs and pressing buttons. Our hands, the finest of instruments made by nature or man, ask for skillful work in order to obtain true satisfaction. Not only that, we fight for the life of our mind in exactly the same way as for the life of our body. Ye can find out about all the efforts that were required of us in this unequal struggle. Unequal because the depth and all-embracing power of nature has not yet been exhausted, and until now humanity tirelessly fights for its mental and physical health and is ready for any attack of natural elemental forces." The end of the speech of Eviza caused a new sound wave of approval. The strict, even inspired seriousness fell from her, and she turned into a joyous woman with a touch of coquetry, who bowed before the audience in the free bow of a dancer. The metamorphosis increased the roar of delight among the medical youth. The Tormancians generally were pleased by the cheerful seriousness of Earthlings, who never joked with great feelings, did not laugh at anyone, did not try to amuse themselves at the expense of another. Eviza returned to her place and again watched the speakers. They said sensible things at the level of science of Tormance, reported new discoveries, but interesting ideas were drowned in a mass of unnecessary phrases. Thought, like a hunted animal, was tossed about between verbal heaps of sayings, digressions, reminiscences, scholastics of evidence. Scientists on Tormance were very much engaged in negation, verbally destroying what supposedly cannot be and what cannot be studied. Well-known natural phenomena were spoken of as if non-existent, not understanding the complexity of the world. This negative direction of science enjoyed the greatest success among the mass of the people of Yanyak because it raised their insignificant experience and narrow common sense to the final word of science. Much time passed, and Eviza, with the exception of psychological observations, received almost nothing worthy of attention. She explained the habit of speaking at all costs by the desire to assert in front of others one's own personality. In addition, spewing out streams of words, a person received the psychological relaxation necessary in this world of constant oppression and irritation. It became more and more tedious to catch thoughts in lengthy speeches. The announced break made Eviza happy. She got up, intending to find a secluded place to walk, rest, but no luck. She found herself surrounded by a noisy crowd of excited Tormancians of all ages, from young trainees to gray-haired chiefs of hospitals and professors of medical institutions. Eviza looked up at the chief physician. He walked over, unceremoniously pushing people aside. "Take you to the cafeteria for a bite." "Step aside, lowly colleagues. Our guest is hungry and tired." Eviza was reluctant to eat, especially in the unfamiliar dining room. She was losing her appetite from the inexplicable enmity of the women distributing food. In the life of Tormance, any dependence on others was humiliating. The one who was asked would mock and swagger before fulfilling his direct duty. Disgust, or, at best, complete disinterest in the job was the hallmark of the Chedi. The lolly shivered in front of them, waiting for the most ordinary service. In factories and plants, where the lilac serpent bearers commanded, the situation was different. The slightest resistance was punished without delay, most often by sending to the Palace of Gentle Death. But outside the vigilant eyes of the dignitaries and guards, the Chedi mocked the lowly with might and main. And the latter endured meekly, knowing that at any moment, by the decision of the Council of the Four, the Chedi could become their executioners. Machines were especially feared on Tormance. The massive use of mechanisms in the hands of ill-mannered and embittered people created an increased danger. Transport accidents became a daily occurrence on Yanyak, and wild reprisals against the long-living were also considered common. Reasoning, Eviza walked next to the chief doctor along the alley towards the low house where the dining room and hotel were located. "Are you wondering why I hid behind the bushes and did not run to help the writer?" suddenly asked the head physician, searching for the eyes of his companion. "No," Eviza replied indifferently. She was indifferent to the personal motivation of the act, which inevitably flowed from the social life of Tormance. "I could have injured my hands and caused harm to many people, making it impossible for them to undergo surgery." Suddenly, a multitude of people jumped out from behind the trees and rushed towards them with a cry. The chief doctor turned gray, his face contorted with fear. Eviza, who remained calm, recognized the young doctors, the conference participants. They flew in a whirlwind, edged out the head physician, and surrounded the guest from the earth in a dense ring. Eviza remembered how, on one of her first days in the capital, she had been struck by the crowd surrounding a beautiful, ridiculously dressed woman. It was a famous artist, as she had later learned. She had scattered trained smiles to the right and left. Several men in red robes had brutally repulsed the equally unceremoniously pressing people. As soon as a popular person came to a public place, hundreds of young people rushed to him, asking for some kind of memorial. Now the starship pilot herself found herself in a ring of the curious, fortunately only doctors. In front of her stood a laughing, rather pretty Tormanzian woman. Dark skin, black hair, and shiny narrow eyes were brightly set off by the yellow robe that fitted her figure. "Do not complain. We have decided to detain ye. We notice that ye want to leave. It is unlikely that we will meet with ye again. We have questions of the utmost importance, and ye do not refuse us. I will not refuse. Eviza answered just as cheerfully, if I can. My knowledge is very limited. What are ye interested in? Sex. Tell us how ye on earth deal with this cause of many troubles, with a mighty whip in your hands of power, the ghost of the highest and false happiness. Tell or at least answer the questions that we could not ask ye in the conference room. Eviza noticed a lawn fenced in by a meridian alley of tall and dense trees and protected from the heat. Her offer to go over there was accepted with enthusiasm. The low and hard grass was strewn with the clothes of people squatting in the shade, and Eviza settled down in front of them on a bump, tucking her legs under her, laughing at herself that she had again become a preacher. Now she had a different goal than at the conference. Here one could, without fear of traumatizing, speak in formulations that always seem harsh when there is a difference in intellectual perception. Eviza looked up at the dark sky of Tormance, turned her gaze to the purple streaks of shadows, and felt the musical logic of thought catch her. She tried to convey the verse of an ancient Russian poet to the Tormanzians more poetically. All with hunger are sick with passion almighty, the flyers and runners, swimmers in the black depths, and the singing ending, and the laggards are driven again by hunger and love with the whip of pain. Man, both on earth and on your Yan-Yak, has struggled in order to eliminate from life these two painful forces. First, the whip of hunger and obtained massive obesity. Then the whip of love, achieving emptiness and indifference towards sexual life. Humanity of Yan-Yak now rejects the power and meaning of sex, now extols this attraction, endowing it with a dominant weight in life. Out of the tossing from one extreme to the other, one's sex education cannot be obtained. And there on earth ye actually have it? Followed a question. Yes, and it is considered very important. One must learn to be the master of one's own body, not suppressing desires, and not obeying them to the point of licentiousness. Is it possible to regulate love and passion? An erroneous concept. When one rides on the crest of a wave, it takes the art of balancing to keep from slipping. But if one needs to stop, then one leaves the wave, trailing behind it. Seeing the bewilderment of the audience, Eviza realized that there were no big surf waves in the seas of Tormance, and that the audience did not know about riding on boards. I spoke at the meeting about double dependence. The wealth of the psyche comes from a strong and healthy body, which, from a multifaceted psyche, is saturated with courage, aspirations, indefatigability, and sensuality. Human biochemistry is such that it requires constant alertness of the brain for 1/5 of its power, and this is supported only by the level of ketosterones, sex hormones in the blood. For this, a person pays, in your words, with a constant erotic acuteness of feeling. If one slows down this feeling for too long, then there arise nervous breakdowns and psycho shifts, followed by a sudden and enslaving attraction to casual partners, which in the old days we called unhappy love. Consequently, it is necessary to discharge and do it impulsively in bursts, said the Tormanzian who had begun the conversation. Quite right. And what about love? After all, an impulse cannot last long. An ancient mistake. Humanity has risen to true love, while here ye continue to believe, in the way of the caveman, that love is only passion, and passion is only sexual union. Do I need to tell ye how much true love is richer, brighter, longer lasting? That great correspondence to all aspirations, tastes, dreams, is that which can be called love, and on our earth is not easily and simply found. For us, love is a sacred word, signifying a feeling very voluminous and multifaceted. But even in its narrowest sense, purely physical, sexual love never has a one-sided connotation. This is more than a pleasure, it is a service towards a loved one, and together with this, towards beauty and society, sometimes even obeying the requirements of genetic laws contrary to personal tastes, if they differ, in the wish to have children. And we have learned to release the insidious power of undischarged hormones, creating inner peace and harmony. Is it possible that on Earth ye have not learned to regulate this force chemically with medicine? Was a question put forward by a neurosurgeon, familiar to Eviza. It is better not to interfere with the complex ligature of hormones that hold the psychophysiological basis of the individual, but to follow the natural path of erotic education. And you teach erotica to girls and boys? Unheard of, the neurosurgeon exclaimed. It started on Earth several thousand years ago. Temple erotica of ancient Greece, Phoenicia, India, elevated to religious service. Devadasi, temple dancers, studied and practiced eros of such an intensity that they completely exhausted sexual desires and transferred a person to other thoughts. Such are the tantric rituals for women. So that means on Earth there has always been a cult of passion in women? A middle-aged listener asked. Will the conversation always diverges into licentiousness and debauchery? Not at all. In primitive societies long before the communist era, women were relegated to the role of draft animals. There existed allegedly sacred rites of special operations, such as the clitorectomy, in order to deprive a woman of sexual pleasure. For what? The Tormancians exclaimed in alarm. So that a woman does not demand anything, but subserviently fulfills her duties as a servant and a childbearing mechanism. What kind of children did they have? Dark and cruel savages. How could it be otherwise? And you dealt with this? You see us here, descendants of all races of the earth. Great snake! How many obstacles are on the way to true kindness and love? A young Tormanzian woman, sitting cross-legged in the front row, thought aloud. Everything is achievable with an intelligent and serious approach to issues of gender. There is nothing more humiliating and repugnant for a man than a woman who demands the impossible from him. A woman is insulted by the need for self-restraint, the obligation to save love, as it was said in the old days. Both sexes should take the sexual side of life equally seriously. There was a disdainful chuckle. A tall doctor with some shiny brooch on his chest stood up and walked in front of the rows of listeners, impudently looking at Eviza. I expected different revelations from the messenger of the earth. These are as old as white stars. What do you practice the initial, so to speak, acquaintance of each pair? Of course, to become a pair of long-term lovers. And if it doesn't last for a long time, both gain a relaxation of tension, being trained in eros. Absolutely impossible with us. Or earthlings do not have the main feeling of love, jealousy. To tell the whole world, this is my woman, there is no such jealousy. This is a remnant of primitive sexual selection. Competition, for the female, for the male, it is all the same. Later, with the establishment of patriarchy, jealousy flourished on the basis of the instinct of ownership, temporarily faded away in the erotically enordered life of ancient times, and was reborn under feudalism, but out of fear of comparison, with complexes of inferiority or humiliation. By the way, the terrible intolerance of your oligarchy is a phenomenon of the same order. In order that people would not dare put others higher, consider them better. Our strong, calm women and men, however, are not jealous, accepting even temporary misunderstanding. But they know that the highest human happiness is always on the edge of his strength. The opponent looked at Eviza in manly appraisal. Probably this is possible only because you earthlings are so cold that your amazingly beautiful appearance repels more than it attracts. Some of the men clapped approvingly. Eviza laughed loudly. On the way here, I heard part of a conversation between those present here who evaluated my merits in completely different terms. And now I feel the attention being directed at my legs. Eviza stroked her round knees, exposed from under her short dress. Not for a minute have I stopped feeling the desire directed towards me. Therefore, coldness does not interfere with attractiveness, and my opponent is wrong. Female doctors awarded Eviza with claps of approval. We really are cold until we let ourselves loose in erotica, and then Eviza slowly got up and straightened, tensed all over, as if in a moment of danger. And the Tormancians witnessed the metamorphosis of the star pilot. Her lips parted, as if for a song or unsaid words, the tiger eyes became almost black. The already defiantly high breast of the young woman rose even higher. The slender neck somehow stood out on the narrow, even shoulders of unthinkable purity and smoothness. The color of excitement showed through the tan on the bare skin. The calm and affable scientist was no longer there. There had become a woman, the very essence of her sex, in defiant beauty and strength, beckoning, formidable, slightly contemptuous. The transformation seemed so striking that her listeners backed away. "Snake, true, snake," came the whispering of the stunned Tormancian women. Taking advantage of the confusion, Eviza left the clearing, and no one dared stop her. Chedi slowly walked along the street, softly humming and trying to hold back the song bursting from her soul. She had the feeling to go out onto a large square. She had long lacked space. The cramped cages rooms in which she now constantly found herself unbearably constricted her. Sometimes overwhelmed by a longing and unable to breathe or to see, Chedi set out wandering, bypassing small and squalid squares, trying to find her way to a park. Now she went alone more often. There were cases when she was detained by lilacs or people with the mark of the eye on the chest. The card invariably rescued her. Sasor drew her attention to a line of characters, underlined in blue, which meant, pay special attention. As Sasor explained, it was a categorical order for all Tormancians, no matter where they worked, in the cafeteria, shop, hairdressing salon, or on public transport, to serve Chedi as quickly and as well as possible. While Chedi was walking with Sasor, she did not use the card, and was convinced in the experience of how difficult it is for an ordinary citizen of the capital to achieve not only a special, but an ordinary, kind-natured attitude. But as soon as the card was presented, the rude people lowered into humiliated bows, trying at the same time to quickly get free of the dangerous visitor. These transformations, caused by fear, repulsed Chedi so much that she only used the card to defend herself against the lilacs. For several days already, Chedi had been unable to contact either Eviza or Vir via SDP. She had not seen Rotus either. Vir Noreen was living among scientists. Chedi decided not to show up there unless absolutely necessary. She was counting on the speedy return of Eviza and wondered what could have delayed her by more than a day. Chedi headed out to her friend on foot, not shy of the considerable distance and the ridiculous planning of the city. Kilometer after kilometer she walked, not looking at monotonous houses, trying to find sculptures and monuments. On any planet reflecting the dreams of the people, the memory of the past, the endeavor towards beauty. On Earth, sculptures were very loved and always displayed in open and secluded places. There, a person found support for his dream back in those days when the bustle of unnecessary affairs and the crampedness of life prevented people from rising above dailiness. The greatest power of fantasy. In hunger, cold, terror, it created images of magnificent people, be it sculpture, drawings, books, music, songs, absorbed the breadth and sadness of the steppe or the sea. Altogether, they overcame the inferno, building the first stage of the ascent. It was followed by the second stage, the improvement of the person himself, and the third, the transformation of the life of society. Thus, the first three great stages of ascent were created, and, as a basis for all of this, served fantasy. And in the city of the center of wisdom, in squares and parks, there were obelisks or images of snakes with instructive inscriptions. Occasionally, one could come across idol-like statues of the great leaders of various periods of the history of Yanyak, despite the difference in clothes, like twins, similar to each other in menacing, adamant-strong faces and postures. There were entirely no sculptures dedicated simply to the beauty of man, ideas, heights of achievement. Here and there, piles of rusty iron jutted out, twisted as if in the writhings of the sick psyche of their creators. These were the remains of sculptures of the epoch, preceding the age of hunger, preserved for the amusement of the modern inhabitants of Yanyak. Passing public buildings, Chedi did not see stained glass windows or frescoes. Apparently, the power of fantasy of the visual arts got in the way of the lords, arguing with them in power over the souls of people. Of course, it was easier to govern a dark and flat psyche, knowing only the most primitive needs and not seeing pathways leading anywhere different. Chedi turned into a narrow alley between identical red houses, adorned with antique black pottery designs. It seemed as if huge drops of resin were streaming along the wide surface of the walls. Here were the apartments of the lowly, Eviza shelter in the capital. Chedi dialed the well-known code to open the door, and in the small hallway, loudly asked permission to enter. The head of the house, an elderly bacteriologist, was constantly absent, being on the patrols of health. The voice of the hostess could be heard, inviting Chedi into the next room. In an armchair, with a book in her hands, was a middle-aged woman with a tear-stained face. It turned out that Eviza had not come home for the fourth day. The woman asked anxiously, "Do you think your earthly friend will still come here? After all, her things remain here. Of course she will come." "But what happened to ye? Trouble? How I need your friend, only she can ease my trouble." "What trouble? Perhaps I can help now." "Aye," the woman sobbed. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Chedi lay her hand on the woman's head. "I can't," the woman lifted the book. "I can't read at all. I cannot see. How could it be? I earned a little on the side with extracts. And now? What am I supposed to do now? How to live? First of all, calm down. Ye have a husband and children. They really need ye. It is scary to become helpless. Ye do not understand. Books were my only joy. I needed nothing, no one. Books gave me everything. And again tears flowed. I cannot see, and our doctors do not know how to help. Tears of helplessness and hopelessness echoed painfully in the soul of Chedi. She did not know how to deal with pity, this novel feeling which gripped her with more and more strength. It was necessary to ask Eviza to help the woman with some powerful medicine. In the ocean of suffering on Tormance, the suffering of a woman was but a drop. Helping a drop makes no difference and is useless for the sea. This is how Chedi was taught on Earth, demanding to always identify the causes of disasters and act, destroying their roots. Here everything turned out to be the opposite. The causes were dazzlingly clear, but neither Chedi nor the entire crew of the Dark Flame could eradicate them in the abyss of the Inferno of Tormance. Chedi sat down next to the crying woman, calmed her down, and only then went home. It grew dark. On the poorly lit streets of the capital, rare passers-by flickered, now appearing in the light of street lamps, now disappearing into the darkness. From the low moon with its faint gray light fell faintly transparent shadows. Perhaps Chedi was the only woman in the empty streets of this area. She was not afraid, like any person on Earth. In the old days, fearlessness was most often based on a dull nervous system and an emanating from ignorance self-confidence. Communist society gave birth to a different higher level of fearlessness, self-control with full knowledge and extreme carefulness in action. Chedi was in no hurry to return to her closet and recalled the silver moonlit nights of Earth, when people seemed to dissolve into the nocturnal nature, withdrawing for dreams, love, or meeting friends for joint walks. Here, with the onset of darkness, everyone rushed home, to the protection of walls, looking around in fear. The helplessness of the Tormanzians before the Arrow of Ahriman had gone far and truly become a tragedy. Chedi walked for about an hour until she reached the well-lit central part of the Center of Wisdom. The evening entertainment attracted a lot of people, mostly Sholi, who, for safety, came in groups of several people. The Loli avoided appearing in places frequented by Sholi. Chedi also sought to avoid companies of Sholi so as not to run into tedious psychological impact, and, even more so, not to use the security card of the Lords. And this time, seeing a group of men approaching, bawling a rhythmic song to the accompaniment of a sound transmitter, Chedi crossed to the other side of the street and stopped under a stone gate. People scurried here and there, exclamations and booming laughter, so characteristic of the inhabitants of Yan-Yak, could be heard. Two young men came up and tried to talk to her. Bright purple and red light flooded the wide staircase, cascading obliquely from the gable of the Palace of Evening Pleasures, surrounded by a double row of square columns of blue and gold. Suddenly, the youths disappeared, as if the wind had blown them away, and the road was blocked by 3 Sholi paragons. They approached, peering at Chedi and talking about something to each other. Suddenly, a rough hand grabbed Chedi from behind, forcing her to turn around. A keen sense of danger prompted her to dodge to the side. A terrible blow inflicted by something heavy, metal, glanced her head, ripped off the skin on the back of her head, tore a muscle and shattered her right shoulder joint with the collarbone and part of the scapula. Falling, Chedi instinctively turned to her left. A severe shock gripped her throat and heart, darkened her eyes, extinguishing consciousness. The shock of the fall pierced her with 1,000 red-hot knives in her shoulder, arm, and neck. With an effort of will, Chedi lifted her head and twitched, trying to kneel down. A familiar face appeared in front of her, as if from afar. Shachek looked at her with fright, anger, and triumph. "Ye?" Chedi whispered with immeasurable surprise. Why? For all his stupidity, the Tormancian did not read either fear or anger on the beautiful face of his victim. Only surprise and pity, yes, pity addressed towards him. The extraordinary psychological strength of the girl awakened something in his dark soul. "What are you standing there for? Hit her again!" one of his friends shouted. "Get away!" Shachek, beside himself, swung a blow at him. They all turned on their heels in flight. Earlier, involuntary witnesses of the vengeful violence had already fled, and the illuminated staircase stood empty. Chedi slowly bent to her side and sprawled on the rocks at the feet of Shachek. In the helpless brokenness of the girl of Earth, so much pure and infinitely distant beauty was disappearing into oblivion that Shachek suddenly felt unbearable grief and repentance, as if he had been torn in two. The Shaling did not know how to cope with such unusual experiences. Shachek was able to overcome them in only one way. Gritting his teeth, he pulled out a long, three-edged needle, thrust it into his chest with a swing, reaching the heart, and crashed, rolling a few steps away from Chedi. Chedi saw nothing. Neither the suicide of Shachek, nor how two lilacs came running, turned her face up, searched her, and, finding the card, in horror, called a man with the eye. "To the Central Hospital, immediately," ordered that.